Hello and welcome to Truth Xpose TV. I'm Aldwyn Altuney and this is episode 6 you are watching right now. It's fantastic that you are joining us today. I have a very special guest. His name is Paul Herman, and Paul and I have known each other now for about 10 years on the Gold Coast. At one point he owned 40 properties in Queensland, and more recently he has been taking on the big guys. He's been taking on the banks. He recently arrested the ANZ for fraud, and he's seeking a royal commission, and he's up to huge things. He's had heaps of media exposure on this topic, and he's really wanting to bring justice to the banking system. Hello and welcome, Paul.
G'day, Aldwyn. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's great to have you with us. I know you've been all over the media last week arresting the ANZ. So can you tell us a bit about your journey? And you had a lot of properties at one point. How did you go from being a property investor to taking on the banks?
Well, it's just after the global financial crisis, there was I had properties that had been a boom, and I was borrowing some money from the ANZ because I wanted to own a home, and also I bought some houses that were quite cheap, and so I made a number of loans. I got a number of loans from the ANZ Bank, and then I had some difficulties, some financial difficulties in 2011, 2012, and all illness. So it just meant that I was under quite a lot of pressure, and at one point I just couldn't repay my loans any further.
Right. And then how did you get from that to dealing with the banks and looking closer at your loan documents? There's a lot of people just get loans and sign away and don't have a close look at it. So what happened from there?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a really difficult situation for people, and that sometimes happens. Sometimes things happen that that interrupt your plans, and that certainly happened to me. And I was wanting to try to survive my financial difficulties, so I worked really hard. But it just at one point it just was obvious, and people were saying to me, maybe you should look at seeing if you want to go bankrupt, because my capacity to pay, my income just wasn't servicing the loan. So then somebody said to me I should ask for a copy of my loan application forms, and I contacted the ANZ Bank and I asked for my loan application forms. They stuffed around a bit, and eventually I got them. I think I had to go to the Ombudsman to eventually get them out of the ANZ Bank. But when they arrived, I noticed there was a lot of pages missing. But I carefully checked through the loan application forms, and there was obviously complete difference between what I'd given the ANZ Bank in terms of my tax returns and the figures that they wrote down. So proper practice was with my ANZ man was that I gave him the tax returns, I signed a form, and he filled out a lot of the details, because I knew it was going to take a number of hours to do that, and that he would do that back in the office, transferring figures from the tax returns over to the loan application forms. Little did I know that there was no comparison between my tax returns and what was later put on my loan application documents.
So what were the figures initially, and what were they turned into?
Yeah, well, just to take one loan application, because I actually, in 2008, I borrowed for a home, so that was one loan, and then there was 2 houses that I bought and another loan. So this was all for investment. And what happened was the income tax figures that I gave the ANZ Bank was $41,500 was my net income for I think it was the 2007 year. So I gave it to them in 2008, and they wrote down on the form 158,400.
Wow.
So that's almost 400% higher.
Wow.
They did the same with my expenses. So my expenses, they reduced them down to about a quarter of what they were. And the same with my liabilities. So they reduced my liabilities down to about a quarter of the information that I gave them.
Wow, that's huge. So what did you do from there?
Well, I was quite shocked, and I'd already been in contact with the BFCSA, which is the Banking and Finance Support Group, so support association. And Denise Brayley was, very helpful. So I contacted her. I joined up. She basically gave a process to go through to dealing with the Ombudsman. She was quite scathing of the Ombudsman. She said that, they were favouring the bank. They weren't supporting customers in the way that the courts had. I found out that the courts had been writing off loans, 75% or 100% of the loan written off if the bank had fraudulently altered the loan application forms, and if the person couldn't pay. So the banks were quite generous and quite hard on the banks for fraudulently altering loan application forms.
And you've started some Facebook pages since then. What are your Facebook pages called?
So I've actually got two lenders. So earlier on, I had borrowed money from the National Bank, and I had difficulties with them. They just didn't want to follow the rules, and so I started a Facebook page called NAB Fraud Fighters. And that was great. I got about 150 people who joined up, and quite a lot of them had some really, really tragic stories. And with ANZ, that was something I was going through the process with the Financial Ombudsman. And recently it's got to the point where they're going to take me to court, and they will take all of my properties. And for me, I wanted to fight because I didn't want to go bankrupt, and I was prepared to try to seek justice. And, if the courts were not happy with the banks committing fraud and were writing off large proportions of the loan, if not 100% of the loan, I was certainly interested in pursuing that avenue.
So you've got NAB Fraud Fighters on Facebook, and the ANZ one is called?
ANZ Unhappy Customers.
Okay, ANZ
and we've
Unhappy.
Just started that. Yeah. And so that's just been really in the last few weeks.
Okay, you've just started that one?
Yeah.
Okay, and you just arrested the ANZ Bank recently, just literally in the last week. Can you explain how that went? What did you do there? And I know you're on the news and on Channel 9, and saw a Bruce Page story there, and some other media covered that. So can you explain exactly what happened with arresting the ANZ Bank?
Well, basically I wanted to highlight to Australians what the banking industry is up to. And I think that, when I first found out, I was completely shocked that a bank would fraudulently alter loan application forms. So, and it has been difficult to explain the story to Australians. So I wanted to really capture the attention of the Australian public and really support the calls for a Royal Commission. So the Greens have backed a Royal Commission, and Labor has, but the Liberal Party has received millions of dollars in donations, we believe. We won't find out how much for 18 months, but so they were not interested in having a royal commission into their mates. So, you know, I wanted to inform the Australian public that this may have been done to them. So I wanted to do it in a very public and it seemed, you know, quite a dramatic way, but I thought that that was certainly something that would get the attention of the media. And, you know, as you said, we had Channel 9 come out. They were great. They have followed a lot of stories with people who are affected by predatory lending. So this practice is called predatory lending or maladministration in lending. And they've run a number of stories, some quite heartbreaking, where elderly people have been targeted because, you know, by the banks because they had a lot of assets. And quite often, you know, the bank has liquidated their assets and, you know, basically they're penniless, you know, in the last, you know, in their retirement that they end up penniless, which is, you know, terrible thing to happen.
Mm. And some of those people never missed a payment, is that correct? And they can still be shut down? How does that work?
Yes, that's a little bit different. So it's a different circumstance, and that's happened to a number of farmers, but it's also happened to a number of investors as well. So there was a lady in Sydney, and she was with the National Bank, and one of her loans fell due. I think it was like a 10-year term loan, or might have even been a 20-year term loan. And in the past, she had always been able to just renegotiate the loans, but the NAB said, no, we want you to pay up straight away. And if you can't, we're going to liquidate you. And she just didn't have $750,000 handy. And so the National Bank did exactly that. They liquidated, I think it was around about $10 million worth of assets. And, you know, she's about 70 now. And it's really quite heartbreaking. Her husband was a National Bank manager, you know, earlier in his career. And it's just heartbreaking to see that happen to somebody. And the other cases have mainly been farmers. So the ANZ Bank liquidated a farmer called Charlie Phillott, and he was 87 years old. He had a farm that was in quite a dry area. I think it was in the Channel country, I'm not sure. But he had a tourist operation on his farm as well. Never been late with a payment. Bank said, this was the ANZ Bank, said pay up or kick you off the property. He said, look, I don't have all the money right now. They kicked him off the property.
Wow.
What's his name? Some of the media picked it up. Anyway, Alan Jones picked it up.
Oh, yeah.
And he went berserk. He was just so angry with the ANZ Bank and ran the story continuously, and other media organisations picked it up. Eventually, Charlie got his farm back and got compensation. So that's the sort of outcome, you know, which is honourable, and we don't expect large corporations to attack, you know, elderly people or farmers or hardworking business people. You know, it's crazy. The CBA was also doing this as well, and it was really widespread. So some of the farmers have collected together to support one another.
And are Westpac known? Westpac's the only other one left out of the big four. Was Westpac also known to have done some dodgy business?
Look, all of the lending institutions in Australia did it, with the exception of possibly just a small number of lending institutions. Heritage, when I spoke to some of their people, they said, oh no, we never did this. But, you know, possibly that's true. But Westpac was certainly doing it as well. I think that CBA was ruthless, and in my experience, the NAB and ANZ are pretty ruthless as well. Westpac certainly, I don't know if they were a little bit kinder, I'm not sure, but perhaps they haven't been in the news quite as much, but certainly all the lending institutions were involved, except maybe a few in the minority.
It's interesting. I interviewed David Icke recently, UK author who's doing a worldwide wake-up tour, and he talked about the banks lending money that doesn't exist and charging interest for it. So that, you know, it's interesting. You know, the whole banking system is, you know, wrought with trouble, it seems. However, you know, we are, I guess, part of the system if we choose to lend from the banks, and you know, there's I guess positive lending and negative lending. You know, you can lend for a good investment or for a not so good investment. And I guess you know, it is very important to be careful what you sign. And I guess, you know, in your experience now, having experienced what you've experienced, how would you move forward with any future loans? What would you be doing differently now compared to before you knew about all of this activity?
Well, you know, it's a good question, and you know, obviously in life you learn and you gain experience. I was an arborist, so you know, I was cutting down trees in my earlier career, and I was new to property investment, and there was a boom on, and things were going great, you know. So you learn as you go along, and you would hope that the banks are being prudent in their lending policies. You don't want to give somebody who's inexperienced enough rope to hang themselves. And, you know, it's just crazy, their behaviour. You expect banks to be prudent. And I guess in my relating with banks, they seem to be prudent. There was this act of prudence, and I thought they were carefully checking all my documentation and, you know, weighing it up carefully, you know, not being reckless. So that gave me a little bit of confidence in what I was doing. You know, I certainly don't want to blame them. As you go through life, you go through learning experiences, and but you don't expect. I don't fraudulently alter other people's documentation. I don't expect, you know, them to do it to customers. You know, like in a lot of cases, it didn't happen to me, but in a lot of cases, the bank employees forged signatures, and that's, you know, completely insane. You know, what is a big corporation doing that for? It's just insane.
And it would be, you know, probably so they would get more commissions for getting the loan over the line and more money in their pocket, right? Is that the reason?
Look, this was a thing that was coming from senior management, and that's the opinion of Denise Brayley from BFCSA. She's a criminologist, and she said that you know, senior management were orchestrating this, and they will use the you know, their employees as scapegoats. It's disgusting behaviour, and the thing is that it's just recently come out. Economist has just come out and said, gave us, you know, another piece of the puzzle why this is happening and why they did what they did, the banks, and that is that the banks were packaging loans that were low doc loans and were fairly high risk, packaging them together and then altering the loan application documents, so increasing the income so that they looked fantastic, and then they were selling them as AAA rated loans to overseas investors. So, you know, they're ripping off overseas investors, fraudulently representing these loans as AAA when they're, you know, subprime. So it's, you know, like, how often you would think that a banking or that a bank, you know, large corporation would learn from their mistakes in the global financial crisis. But we believe this was happening right up until 2012, and I think there was some legislative changes then that tightened up some of their behaviour, but it may well have been still going on, up until this present day, because, the banks are a law unto themselves. They're like cowboys. They're like behaving like Russian, gangsters, I reckon. It's this sort of fraud and criminality is crazy.
Well, good on you for standing up to the banks. You are proof that, if there is some injustice out there, that we shouldn't just sit back and say, oh, what can we do as, poor little old me, actually to stand up and fight it and say, no, this is not right. And, to collect a group of supporters, I guess, which is what you've done with your Facebook pages. Now you've got other people now coming forward saying, yes, they've also been, subject to this as well. So, there's a big lesson here in that, the power of one, the ripple effect of that, of speaking your message. And of course, with the media help on your side, that helps really expand that message so much further as well. So what would you say to others who might be sitting on the fence saying, thinking, oh, what can I do? What would you say to those people who might just not have quite enough courage right now to come out with their story?
Yeah. Well, if you do come out with your story, it inspires other people. And, there's been elderly people who have told their story and have been courageous. And I guess it inspires other people who, may feel like they're totally alone. And that is, like I felt totally alone. I was busting my bum to try to repay these loans, and I was borrowing from my family. I wanted to do everything I possibly could to meet my commitments, and then when I couldn't, it is very depressing, and you do feel like the world is against you, I guess, and or that you're in a hole, or perhaps it's of your own making, or whatever, or maybe it's just through inexperience or whatever. And I think that it's great to give others the inspiration to take a stand. And I take a lot of my inspiration from people like Mahatma Gandhi. I love history, and protest is an internationally guaranteed right. So you have every right to take a stand and to protest, to wave a placard. And, I've found that the best way to do that is to courteous to the public, to not be obnoxious. And our society does give you a lot of, I guess, freedom to take a stand and to voice your opinion. So that's great. And I think that we should be doing that. And I think that, where there is serious injustice, we should, just not walk away, not throw up our hands. Certainly Mahatma Gandhi was a great one for speaking and acting courageously.
Yeah, and the police will sometimes step in, as they did when we were out at Russell Island together, and the banks were foreclosing one of your properties, in fact auctioning off one of your properties, and the police turned up. Can you explain what happened there and where that went to?
That was pretty funny. I thought that our rights were impinged upon. So I've got a right, if I'm protesting, to freely do that on a public place, as long as I'm not obstructing somebody's business. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Because I had an alarm on it. But just on my phone. So it's been great to learn, I guess, how to protest, because I've come into contact with the police quite a lot since then, and generally they've got really good intentions for everybody concerned. So I had 2 police officers turn up at a protest I did last week. I protested corruption in government outside Steve Chobbo's office. He's the Minister of Trade, and he's got his office near Surfers Paradise. Yep. And the police turned up, and they were just so helpful. And so they were great, you know. They just checked, you know, to make sure that I wasn't endangering anybody's life, you know, because I'm close to a roadway. We just had a chat about that. They were supportive of me, you know, exercising my rights as a citizen. They were great. And I think that, you know, if you go with the right attitude to the police, they're just going to help you in your cause.
Okay.
They may not intentionally do that, but, you know, they're there to help and serve the public. And I know that, you know, some people who don't always get a great experience from the police, but quite often, you know, they might be cheeky or whatever. And I'm polite. I realise they're doing a job, you know, and I'm not looking for confrontation. I'm not looking to hurt anybody. And I think they respect that.
Okay. So generally the police have been they've been pretty good. And the Russell Island situation, I know they were trying to get you away from the auction.
I got sidetracked. Yeah, it was very funny because, you know, you were there and we got some great footage. It was because the policeman was trying to prevent me interacting with the auction because there was an auction taking place, and I wanted to hand out some leaflets and tell everybody my story. And so it was very funny. It was like he was at the end of his tether with my behaviour, trying to give out these leaflets, and he didn't want me to, you know, obstruct the auction. I guess he saw that as obstructing the auction, which I don't believe so. You know, I think that, you know, it's my right to express my opinion, and then once I've done that, you know, they get on with their business. So, but there was a little bit of a clash of wills there, and it was pretty funny.
Yes, and that footage went on a Current Affairs, some of that footage with the police officers.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is one thing about,
look,
you know.
I just wanted to say that he's a lovely police officer, a lovely person, and I guess I know my rights more now, and I probably could be a little bit more assertive in exercising them. And I guess, you know, he was on Russell Island. I don't think he saw many protesters, so, you know, it may not have been an area that he was really familiar with the law. And the other thing is that there's been a lot of accusations that the banks influence police and prevent charges of fraud. So I don't know if there was some instructions that he got from head office. I've got no idea, but it has been very disappointing that in Australia there has been a number of police complaints and they do not proceed. So there's the capacity for the banks to corrupt the political process, and you know, I guess that the legal avenues that you've got to seek justice, the banks exploit all of them to their very best ability because they don't like parting with compensation, you know, so that's what's happening.
Now, those signs behind you, did you have those up for the federal election recently in Australia? Did you have those around the place? And what do they say, some of those signs behind you?
Well, there's, I'd have to read them, but one of them was, from memory, was Malcolm Turnbull in bed with the banks. So that was one of the signs. And the other sign was protesting ANZ fraud and telling ANZ that they were under arrest for fraud. There's, it just, and really highlighting predatory lending. So I wanted to capture people's attention with signs. I guess that's what you do with signs. And you know, it's the public is by and large 98% been 100% supportive, quite often they toot as they're going past or wave, and because the banks have not, people know that the banks don't have a good record with their customers, and that's disappointing. And I guess from a large corporation's point of view, it is a difficult relationships because you're a big bureaucracy and you've got to manage your customer relationships. But it doesn't help. I don't think it's good business practice when you commit fraud. How is that good for the customer? How is that good for the bank? It's not.
Well, the lies always come out.
Those issues. Yeah.
Truth comes out in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, you never get away with a lie, really.
Yeah.
So, even if they might think it's a half lie or a small lie, and that's, what this Truth Expose TV is about, is me being sick of seeing all the lies out there in society that people have been fed for years. And, it is about time we woke up to these things. So thanks to people like you, Paul, getting out and educating us about what is going on. So how can we get copies of our loan documents for those of us that have loans with the bank?
Okay, so probably the easiest way to do it is join BFCSA and talk to Denise Brayley. So she basically put together a package, costs $60, and she gives you all the documentation, how to go through the process. You can just contact the bank yourself, and if you don't particularly have a problem with the bank, if you're not in financial difficulties, you could just go straight to the bank and ask them, but they may ignore that, or the banks are very nervous about giving out the loan application forms now. But it's your right under the Privacy Act to get those documents, and very likely you could get compensation even if you haven't suffered difficulties, if they've fraudulently altered your loan. So I don't know if people want to go down that avenue, but certainly if you're in financial difficulties, it's important to not be wiped out financially by somebody else's criminal behaviour. So I would strongly recommend that you go get those loan application forms, and then you can start the process with the Ombudsman. Now, I can tell you about the Ombudsman. So
Sure.
I might as well tell you now.
Yes.
The Ombudsman is paid by the banks. So the Ombudsman goes to the bank when a complaint is lodged and says to the bank that they should pay them so many thousands of dollars to handle this complaint. And so the bank pays them, and then they investigate. The banks have this very close working relationship with the Ombudsman, and evidence was given to the Senate inquiry into ATSIC and other Senate inquiries that the Financial Ombudsman favours the banks. In my experience, they did nothing to bring the bank into account for the fraud that they wrote. In fact, they said that there was no evidence of fraud. Now, I would say that they're turning a blind eye to the fraud, and it's just they're whitewashing the complaint for the benefit of the bank. And that's mine, and it certainly would be the opinion of Denise Brayley and the evidence that has come before senators and other local members.
And how can you actually prove the fraud? Like, you've got documents there showing, showing some changes. Can you show us those there?
Yeah. I would have no difficulty in proving fraud before the courts. There's been some amazing cases. There's a man who was on Channel 9, and he had income of $20,000, and he wrote that down on his form, and they just wrote a 1 in front of the 20,000 and said it was that his income was $120,000. So that's the sort of things that the banks have done. But I'll just bring up these documents, and I'll just also get them so that I can see them as well. So if you'll just bear with me 2 seconds. There we go. Now, the number one is this document. So this is I've cut this out from a loan application form. So in black is the part of the loan application form. So it's about 1/3 of a page. And you can actually see down the bottom there that there's some facts in print. I think that's a fax in print. On some of these you can see it, but I've got the full documents and I've sent them off to the media.
Okay.
So these are just little excerpts.
Lift that a little bit higher, please, Paul.
Okay, sorry. And up the top it says,
that's great.
ANZ fraud increased my income by 400%. So if you go down and you see the current grossly monthly income is $16,000. That's at the bottom. Current net monthly income is $12,000. So my actual gross income is off to the right in the red. It was $4,553 in my 2007 tax return that's applied to ANZ. The net income was $3,461, not $12,000 a month. So they just plucked a round figure and slapped it on the form. They also said I was a real estate agent. So that's number one.
Wow. Thank you for that. It was a little bit blurry, but I get what you're saying there. And I'm sure if people want to see that closer, they can contact you about that on Facebook. Yeah,
they can. I've got these forms on Facebook so they can have a look there. I'm sorry if it's a bit blurry. So this is number two.
Oh, no, that's okay. We got the gist of it. Yep, and here's the second one.
Okay. Now I'll move it up as we go along, just hopefully so that you can see a little bit better.
Can see that.
But this is where the ANZ put down my liabilities. Now, this is unbelievable. I had a loan up the top, it was ANZ mortgage, $72,000. They put down amount owing was zero, but it was $64,236.85 on the date that they filled out this form. This is actually, I think that they might have entered this into the computer, so I'm not exactly sure. It's from the document ANZ online applications. So, you know, it's obviously fraud because ANZ certainly knew how much my loan balance was. So they wrote down zero when it was $64,236.85. Ridiculous. Same with the credit cards. There was, they've understated other store cards. Down the at the bottom of that box, it says there was an $85,000 mortgage. Again, they said that it was zero. So they said my total liabilities was $416,000. In fact, that bottom mortgage may have been zero because it was just a newly opened account. But total liabilities were in actual fact $16,000. So they reduced it down to a quarter of my actual liabilities. Not only that, is that they forgot to put down other ANZ mortgages. So I've highlighted it in yellow down below. There was another mortgage for $82,000 and another mortgage for $87,000. They didn't include my NAB loan and my other loan with BH Knowles. So were you going to ask a question?
Well, it's interesting how they conveniently forgot the other loans. That's a pretty major thing.
It is pretty amazing. I hope you can see all of that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, got that.
And
wow, that is quite unbelievable. So,
yeah.
and obviously,
another two, but do you want to see them, or was that enough?
Oh no, that's Okay, we get the idea. We get the idea. I'm sure if
Yeah.
anyone wants to see them in more detail, they can
Yeah.
contact you through Facebook. So either through NAB Fraud Fighters or through ANZ Unhappy Customers on Facebook. So contact Paul Herman that way if you want to see those documents in more detail. So, you know, where to from here then? What are you hoping to gain out of, you know, arresting ANZ? I mean, apart from, you know, getting some justice on this matter, are you seeking financial compensation for yourself and others right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like the same deal that has been awarded by the courts. And the other thing is that I really am passionate about helping other people too, especially elderly people. You know, I want to get this resolved so that I can move on in life. And, you know, I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in the whole idea of activism. So that's where I'd like to go after this is all handled and sorted out.
So you're going to go into politics and bring some honesty to the system,
Well,
Paul?
I want to engage, I guess, with the political system as an activist.
Okay.
And, you know, Facebook and social media is great for that because, you know, like what we're doing now is we're communicating on social media and internet TV. I don't understand all of that, but I'm very interested in producing our own videos so that we can communicate with other Australians about the political process or about issues with large corporations that are abusing their power. Yeah, I think that's it's a great. It's something that inspires me, and I like what Russell Brand has done, but Russell Brand is very far to the left, and you know I'm more interested in what average Australians are concerned about and helping us to perfect democracy. So they're issues that I'm interested in.
Very good. And have any of the banks admitted in any way that they have fraudulently you know, done any of this at all? Have they admitted guilt at all, any of the banks?
No, I don't believe they have. Actually, the Financial Ombudsman did say that they shouldn't have given me one loan, but you know, the ANZ Bank was obviously not interested in compensation. So FOSS, so the Ombudsman, which we call him FOSS for short, Financial Ombudsman Service, they didn't really bring the ANZ to account, and the ANZ Bank has seen no need to admit to fraud. So, you know, I think that they really are scared of a Royal Commission. So, and all of this will come out in a Royal Commission.
So what's likely? So with the Royal Commission, what is that likely to bring out? As you say, all this will come out, but would there also be, you know, a major class action? Obviously, they'd be worried financially. It could really hit them if there's a big class action of people wanting compensation. You know, what is likely to happen with the Royal Commission? How long will that take? What's the details?
I guess that it's a big concern, and you know, we believe that there's Denise Brayley believes that almost all low doc loans were fraudulently altered, and quite a few of the full documentation loans were fraudulently altered. So, you know, maybe half of all loan application forms have been fraudulently altered. This would come out in a Royal Commission. We'd start to get a picture of what's happened. And, you know, I think that you have to bring to account criminal behaviour when it occurs, because you need to make sure that that doesn't happen in business. So, you know, I think that it's going to be very traumatic, you know, for the banking industry, and I think that that's quite sad, and I think that it's going to perhaps impact the Australian economy. But I think it's something that we need to go through, and I think that if there was proper scrutiny of our banking industry by APRA, by the Reserve Bank, and by ATSIC, and by the Ombudsman, and if that had occurred, you know, decades ago, because there was complaints of this happening decades ago, and government institutions such as APRA have been asleep at the wheel. ATSIC is absolutely useless, and you know, there was a lot of evidence given to the Senate inquiry that ATSIC basically has been asleep at the wheel, and this should not have come about. It absolutely should not have come about, and you need to clean out corruption in the banking industry, and a Royal Commission is the only way to do that, because ATSIC just has not done it. ATSIC has brought no complaints of fraud. They've investigated no complaints of fraud. Denise Brayley has 2,000 examples of fraudulently altered loan application forms. They've taken no action. There's been lots of complaints there. When I rang ATSIC, they said to me that they were not interested in investigating the fraud of the ANZ Bank.
Wow, that's unbelievable. They're just not interested. So
Yeah,
basically, it doesn't matter what you say. They don't care about what you say. They're just not interested. Well,
they're not interested in the evidence.
Wow. So what's it going to take to get a Royal Commission happening then?
Well, I think we're almost there. You know, we still don't know the numbers for the Parliament, but Labor and Greens have backed a Royal Commission, and quite a lot of the independents have as well. So if we end up with a minority government, that would be very good, because we've probably got the numbers. Some of the Liberal Party members have come out strongly for a Royal Commission, and they may well cross the floor. It's absolutely vital, if the banks use their muscle on the Liberal Party and they stick to their guns, trying to avoid a Royal Commission, that it's absolutely vital that we communicate effectively with our local members and those in the lower house to see if we can get some of them to cross the floor, because the longer this drags out, the worse it's going to be for the banking industry and the Australian economy. You want a thorough investigation. We need to make sure that the banks aren't going to do this again. You know, they didn't learn their lesson in 2008 with the global financial crisis, and they should have learned their lesson then. We don't want these sort of crises coming up, you know, disrupting our economic well-being. You know, you just can't have that continuously.
So are there any banks now, knowing what you know, any banks you would trust to go to for a loan from now? And which banks would they be? If you do trust some banks, which would you go to?
Look, they may have all reformed their practices. I'm not sure. Denise Brayley is pretty sceptical about that. But there was new legislation in 2012. I certainly recommend going to some of the smaller banks like Heritage, or, you know, but there's been stories with Bendigo Bank, you know, accusations, and there's been accusations with Bank of Queensland, Bank of Adelaide. So almost all of the lending institutions, I would say that Denise Brayley has evidence of fraud. You could contact the BFCSA and ask them what banks they recommend. But I guess the thing is that their lending standards should be tighter. I think that they were throwing around money too in 2015, and APRA reined them in a bit. But you know, there's been a property boom in Australia for the last, about 49 years. I think it was since 1968, this boom that, has been almost continuous with, a few little downturns, but earlier in last century, there was bigger downturns. Last 50 years, we haven't had any real big downturns. And I think that inflating our property market so much will lead to a bigger downturn. And I think that was avoidable. We shouldn't have such expensive property in Australia.
Mm. So you had 40 properties at one point. How many have you got now?
I've still got about 11 properties.
Okay. And are you battling with the banks over those properties now, or is it over the...
Yes, I would like to retain. Yeah, I'd like to retain, what I've got. If the banks had not lent to me recklessly, basically I would have made some mistakes, and I would have found it difficult in a downturn or with health problems, but I would have been able to hang on to my assets. It's there was all of the property speakers were saying to borrow as much as you can and reinvest it in property. And I was an entrepreneur, and I was keen to, I guess, save for my retirement and build a good investment base. And so that's what I did. And of course you make mistakes. You don't want to be wiped out, though.
Well, you're not wiped out. You've still got 11 properties, so that's a lot more than a lot of other people out there. And however, it's a quarter of what you had at one point. So that's quite a big contrast. So where to from here? Are you going to look to buy more?
Sorry, I was going to say on that point that quite a lot of the properties are cheap land. So I mean, I'm certainly not a millionaire or anything like that, but obviously I wanted to have a good asset backing for my retirement, and to take on challenges like, I'm interested in politics, so to take on, plans like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
So future plans investment-wise. So, okay, so a lot of them are cheap blocks of land that you've got, 11 properties. So it might sound like, 11, there's properties and there's properties. So they're cheap blocks of land, you're saying. So are you looking to grow that further now, or what are your plans with your investments now moving forward?
Yeah, I'd say also that I've got houses. But, yeah, certainly I want to grow. I'm young enough to recover. And I certainly want to do that. But there's a lot of economists that are very concerned about the price of housing. And, I think if you're listening to serious economists, and there's plenty of them on the ABC, that they would not be recommending investing in Australian real estate in many suburbs. So there's isolated suburbs where I think there's good opportunities. And I was on Russell Island, that's where my investments were, and I still think there's good opportunities there. But, I also am interested. I'm helping Mum with some of her investments in the stock market, and I think there's some better opportunities in the stock market rather than, certainly wouldn't buy in Sydney. It's just too late for it to be a good investment. And if you're having prices retracing, which I certainly believe they will over the next decade, that we could have quite a serious downturn in property, not helped by the banking industry's behaviour. I just don't think Sydney's or Melbourne is a good opportunity. That's for me anyway. It's my analysis.
And for those who don't know where Russell Island is, it's between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And I believe the southeast section of Queensland is the fastest growing area in Australia. And I believe there's about 1,500 people or so just moving to the Gold Coast every week. So, and now with the Commonwealth Games coming up, that's going to be, I can predict there'll be a bit of a boom coming up, I think, for the Gold Coast area in the next few years.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the property market there. And back to the banks and what they're doing. I have found so many mistakes in my bank documents. A lot of people don't read their bank statements, but the number of times I've been overcharged for things, or there's payments on my credit card that I don't know about. You really need to look closely at your bank statements, just with your general everyday banking as well. So would you like to make some comments about that, Paul? Have you noticed that yourself as well? Have you picked up a whole lot of mistakes with just general banking situations, with fees and things like that charged that shouldn't have been charged?
Look, I hear stories. So there was one lady who said that money was coming out of her account continuously, and that was, she said that was an employee who was taking the money, and the bank didn't want to give compensation or something like that. So, we need to have a very strong financial ombudsman service that is going to take care of customers who do have disputes with the banks. My experience of the ombudsman services that I've dealt with is that they see their role to whitewash or get rid of complaints, and not to really service the public. And that shocked me. That was my experience in Queensland as well, with the Ombudsman Service and the Crime and Corruption Commission. I think they've got a new name now. But look, I can't comment on, I guess, smaller matters, and that's where you need to go to the Ombudsman and get those looked into. I guess, where everybody's human, and there's going to be mistakes and disputes. So you hope that you can deal with your bank, and they will treat you with understanding and with compassion, like any business. So, when I'm dealing with Telstra or any other large corporation, I would hope that they deal with me in a way that is consistent with good customer service. And that's about all I can say on the subject. But, and we need to, customers, we really need to hold them to account.
So in this case, yourself, obviously you haven't been getting that courtesy with what's happened with your loan documents, which is why you've arrested the ANZ Bank and why you've been taking things further, because you haven't been getting that due consideration and care from ANZ and NAB earlier. So, when I guess when you don't have people that are going to listen to what you're saying here, sometimes you do have to take things further and have that courage to step up. And it's interesting who comes out of the woodwork when you step up and speak up about something. You really do inspire others to also speak up and say, this is just not good enough, and we need some accountability here. So moving forward, we're coming almost to the end of our 1 hour show. It's gone very quickly. Okay. And we could keep on chatting. Now, is there any other points you want to make about what you've been up to with the banks and what people can do?
Well, one of the things that I did do, so last week it was coming up to the election, so we had the election last Saturday, and I think it's a great opportunity. I saw it as a great opportunity to communicate with our democratic process, so to communicate with voters. So I did a protest at Burleigh Heads at the polling place, and it was really to have some fun and to I guess demonstrate in a strong way and in a way that's going to communicate strongly with the democratic process, and to have people see that, because I really believe that if we keep voting for the two major parties, and obviously I have my preference about which one I like, but if we keep voting for Tweedledum and Tweedledee, which they've often been called, they're just they don't care about us. So the corruption that is in the system, they're not going to do anything to change that, you know, because they're quite comfortable with it. And they have their luncheons where they have luncheons with their corporate mates, and their corporate mates dictate to the politicians what they should be doing. And if we don't communicate effectively with our politicians, we're going to lose out through that, you know, the way it goes in Canberra.
So step up and speak out, and
absolutely.
Connect with Paul on his Facebook pages. We've got NAB Fraud Fighters and ANZ Unhappy Customers, and of course Paul Herman has his own personal page on Facebook as well. Anything else you'd like to say to people to connect with you, Paul? How else can they connect? What do you encourage them to do?
Yeah, look, if you know of people who are suffering, that they don't need to suffer alone. So there's a lot of organisations out there. There's Bank Reform Now. There's quite a few organisations that are bank specific, and there's some farmers organisations. So it's really important to, if you know somebody who is really struggling, to connect them up with some of these organisations. I can help people where I can, but I can also point them in the right direction and help them to have a bit of a plan for how they're going to go about getting justice if they're a victim of some sort of bank corruption.
Fantastic. So you'll be a great support for people. So that's excellent, Paul. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom, and good on you for taking on the banks. All power to you, and I really want to see that Royal Commission happen. So please keep us posted, and no doubt you will be on your Facebook pages. Any final words, Paul?
Well, look, you know, I just really appreciate you helping us to get this message out, because it is vital. And you know, I think that it's going to affect every Australian. It's going to affect every Australian for generations. So it's a really important issue, and the media has been fantastic at getting this message out, especially Channel 9. And you've been such a great support for me, helping me through my journey of taking a stand. So I'm very grateful to you as well. So thank you, Aldwyn.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love working with you, and we always have straight conversations. I love that. There's no mucking around. There's no crap when we chat. You know, it's always straight down the line, and we get straight to the point and speak our truth. I love that. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's watching this right now. If you've got any questions, comments at all about this show, we welcome you to put it on the Facebook page, Truth Xpose TV. Please comment on there. Also on YouTube, under this recording right now, I'd love to see your comments on there, and I'd love to connect with you on future shows. You can connect with me personally also on my website for AA Xpose Media. That's AAXPOSE.com, AAXPOSE.com, to connect with me personally, and of course with Paul on NAB Fraud Fighters on Facebook, and ANZ Unhappy Customers, taking on the banks. So if you're feeling unhappy in any way with the banks, connect with Paul and join forces, and let's see some justice out there. So thanks once again. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again very soon on Truth Xpose TV. Bye for now.
Thank you, Aldwyn.
Thanks, Paul. Bye.